All right, you may be seated wherever you're at in this place, online. Thanks for joining with us today on this Father's Day, Father Figures Day. If you haven't signed up, I know Charlene's there. Maybe we'll give one last chance. If you're a father or a future father or could be a father figure, basically for any guy in this place, we are giving away a barbecue today at the end of service. So even if you don't have any natural kids, I think potentially every father has the ability to be a father figure to someone. And so we want to celebrate you today. So Charlene's, give a wave, Charlene. I don't know. If you haven't got your name in, maybe, sneakily walk over there now while I tell some dad jokes. And then it won't be at an opportune time because this is your chance to get it. Pastor Jim upgraded the barbecue. We have a portable one hiding in that corner. And I bought it, and Pastor Jim had told me he wanted to get the barbecue, which makes sense now because I bought the portable one, which we have done in the past. And he said, I can't cook my famous meal on a small portable barbecue. And I said, you're absolutely right. So you guys are blessed. You get the upgrade today. So it's gonna be great. If I could win, that would have been fantastic. But I guess you can't win if you're putting on the contest. So. That would be pretty funny, Pastor Jim coming to my house and putting on a meal. So anyways, Father's Day, I thought I would start off with some dad jokes. How many of you like a good dad joke? No? See, what I've discovered is also now that I have stepped in being an executive pastor role, there's also a category of pastor jokes. And when you combine pastor jokes and dad jokes, it's just something else. And so I think I have the full dual effect going on here, but these ones, I went over these a few times and I could still laugh because these are perfect dad jokes. So here we go. Here's some dad jokes. I'm afraid for the calendar, its days are numbered. My wife said I should do lunges to stay in shape. That would be a big step forward. These are great. This one you might be able to guess. I was able to guess. Why do fathers take an extra pair of socks when they go golfing? In case they get a hole in one. Hole in one? Hole in one? Singing in the shower is fun until you get soap in your mouth. Then it's a soap opera. That one's bad. That one's, even for me, that one's like next level. Yikes. What do a tick and the Eiffel Tower have in common? What do a tick and the Eiffel Tower have in common? They're both parasites. Parasites. Oh. What do you call a fish wearing a bow tie? Sophisticated. Sophisticated. I thought that one was one of the funniest, actually. Oh, how about this one? How do you follow Will Smith in the snow? The actor Will Smith. How do you follow Will Smith in the snow? Someone might already be there. You follow the Fresh Prince. This is all about how life got twisted, turned upside down. Anyways, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, if you don't know it. What did the ocean say to the beach? Nothing. Just waved. Couple more. What do you call a factory that makes okay products? A factory that makes okay products. A satisfactory. I only know 25 letters of the alphabet. I don't know why. Some of you will be home later at lunch and be like, I don't know why. You'll get that maybe. And finally, how does the moon cut his hair? Eclipse it. Eclipse it. And one that I made up, that my wife is cringing that I'm about to say. Knock, knock. Europe. Real mean. Think about it. Think about it. Europe. Europe who? Sorry. Okay, I found another one off of that. Let me make sure I get it right. Oh yeah, knock knock. I got up. Oh, gross. Anyways, those are dad-invented jokes with my kids. You'll get those later. Never mind. All right, let's get past these. I wasn't going to do them. They weren't written in my notes. I should have went with that. So we're going to jump back. I got a poo. It was funny for me and my kids. Mostly Dorori, yeah. We're going to jump back into this series today, and that we started a few years ago. It feels like that sometimes. A few weeks ago, and called Figure It Out. And 2 weeks ago, we started off by talking about action figures. If you were there, you probably remember that. And talking about releasing the super within you. Last week, we talked about full figure and reflecting the super in you. And today, we're going to talk about father figures flexing the super in you. Come on, look at your neighbor and flex for them. Show them what you got. If you're watching today, thank you for watching. I think there's a flex emoji. So if you're watching on Facebook, we have Facebook back. Why don't you show me your flex emoji? I think if you put muscle or strong, it'll come up. Let me know that you're watching today. Leah Link says, Happy Father's Day. Thank you, Leah. Adrian says, good morning, Adrian. Christy's watching with us this morning. Good morning, Leah. Ralph is there. Good morning, Ralph. So thank you for interacting on Facebook. So we're going to just do a quick review and then jump right into Father's Day stuff. We got a lot to get to from the giveaways, and I want to make sure, hearts get touched. And so 2 weeks ago, like I said, we learned about the super in us, how we must become action figures. I talked about how we can't just be listeners, which tends towards pretending. But we must be people of action. We must put things into practice, not just pretend. And so if you get some words of wisdom, if you go to counseling and your counselor says, hey, you should try doing this. If you come to church and the word is presented and you know you should do it, oftentimes we hear it and we think, man, that's great. And we walk out the door and just kind of, poof, it's gone. Or we have good intentions, but we don't follow through. And so James says you kind of deceive yourself. You feel like you got a grasp on it, but unless you're willing to put it into practice, the super in you doesn't get released. It stays dormant. And so that was 2 weeks ago. You can watch it online if you want to find out more. Last week, we got into the idea of full figure, and that in order to reflect the super in us, we must be willing to become full figures. This is done by looking in the perfect law of freedom, or the perfect law of liberty, who I said became Jesus when he was the Word who became flesh. When you look in Jesus, when you look into the Word and the perfect law of freedom, then we can see who we really are and start reflecting that, rather than looking in a mirror and just comparing. Who's ever compared when looking in a mirror? Compared to maybe what you looked like before. Or you can also do this. You can hold people up and use them as a mirror and go, I don't compare to that. Or things, right? And we compare, well, they have that, if I had this. And we can hold people or things in front of us and go, how do I compare to that? When in fact, all we're required to do is reflect Jesus and reflect what is put inside of us and not compare. And so that's how we become a full figure. And at the end, if you didn't see the analogy I did at the end, you got to go back and watch it. It blew my mind. And so what happened is, if you find yourself always pointing towards comparison instead of reflection and struggling with that, the solution to that, remember at the end I had that jar in front and I took it and I said, if you get filled, tying into what Pastor Jim said a few weeks ago, if we're able to get filled, then guess what? The figure gets flipped in your life. And when I filled that up, that figure actually flipped. The arrows flipped from going from comparison to reflection. And so if you struggle with comparison in your life, you need to get filled with what? The presence of God, but ultimately the love of God and how much he loves you. And the love of Jesus, I talked about the width, the depth, the breadth, the height of the love of God for you. It can change everything. It can flip the way you see yourself like that. And so you want to have a full figure. You stand in front of the mirror and say, I'm full. Full figured. Okay, today, which brings us today, father figures. Flexing the super within you. Come on, do a different flex for your neighbor. Did anyone flex? Oh, we got a lot of flexing online. There's some double flexes going on. Alana double flexed it. She did both. Bonnie, thank you. City Center Church is flexing. Kat Davidson. Ralph, Lance, Adrian, man, that's a lot of flexing. Yeah, so we're going to flex today, and here's the question we're asking. If you want to know what flex means, it literally is this, but in kind of the Urban Dictionary. It means a boastful statement or display put on a skill, a talent, or ability to use, or to show off, to purposely brag. Kind of the super that's in you. You kind of go, yeah, I've got an ability. I've got some things God's put in me. I've got some talents. I've got some super inside of me, and I'm going to start to flex them. I'm going to let that out. That's kind of the word flex. So the question we're asking today, what would I be if a superhero was flexed out of me? If they were to flex, if they were to show off a superhero, what would it be? Would it be, it could be anything. Teacher, business person, stay-at-home mom. What would a superhero be if it was flexed out of you? And so we've been reading from James 1:19 to 27, and I had it all written out. We were going to read it all, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to go to the last two verses. Listen, if you want some summer reading over the month of July, read James 1:19 to 27 a lot. There is so much in there that can help challenge you, change you. There's a ton in there, but we're going to just start with verse 26 here for the sake of time and get into these last two verses. And it says this, do any of you think you are religious? Anybody think they're religious? I know that's a trick answer for some of you because you're like, no, it's not religion, it's relationship, right? All those things. I think in context of this, they mean if you call yourself a Christian, if you look towards a God or you have a practice of a moral center that's God-like, that's a religion. So it's okay in this context to be religious. And so he's saying, do any of you think you are religious? I think most of us were here today, unless you're visiting, you would be considered religious in this way. You're coming to church, you're a Christian, you're a Jesus follower. And it says this, if you do not control your tongue, your religion is worthless and you deceive yourself. I don't like that verse. Anybody else with me? Like that verse, that's such a strong verse. If you don't control your tongue. If you don't control your tongue. I just kind of wanted to give a few final thoughts to kind of close out the last two and tie it into this one. Here's 2 ways to make your super subpar. I've been using that. Just 2 quick ways to make your super subpar. Number 1, don't practice anything. And then this, say whatever pops into your head. If you want to make the super in you a little subpar, if you want to kind of make your testimony and your religion or your Christianity a little less than it should be, why don't you just say whatever pops into your head? Don't put up your hands, but I've been there. I was there on Friday, confession time. I was bringing some food to Scott and his wife who just had a baby. And I was just bringing it. I was just the vessel of bringing it. And Jen Ward had made it. And my wife, my smart, amazing wife, had told me that there's construction around the place where she stays. And so she's like, you should go at 4:30. I was going to be there at 4:45 to meet them. And my mind is like, I don't care what constructions there's there. I don't want to get there at 5:40, 5:38 and sit there waiting. I will go, 4:40, 4:38 and sit there waiting. I'm going to go with a few minutes to spare. It does not take that long to get there. Man, if you've been around that construction over there, I don't know what's going on. I have never seen construction like that in Saskatoon. I had to go up and I was like, okay, and they said go up Avenue D. Well, you couldn't get to Avenue D from 22nd. So I was like, nope. And then I went all the way back to like Idlewild, and then I had to go all the way around to H, get past it on 29th, loop around, park a block and a half away and walk there. And then get back. And then I knew that I was supposed to be meeting somebody at 4:45. Let me tell you, my tongue was not representing my Christianity very well that day. That moment, as every driver that went in front of me seemed to be going slow. Anyone ever been there? And I was glad I had no kids in the car at that moment, because I was like, like things that you say and get angry. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm talking about this 2 days later at church about my tongue and genuine religion. So I didn't do well with that. But the point is that the tongue, it says in Scripture, is like a little steering thing for a big ship, like a rudder, and it can change the direction of your life. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. I've been plenty of times where my tongue has probably not represented my religion or my Christianity or my super properly. Whether it's with my wife, kids, driving, maybe it's talking to your friends, gossiping about someone else, steering, not representing what God says about them, what God thinks about them. So we'll just move on from that because everyone can say, we don't want to sit on that today. But that could preach. Verse 27, what God the Father considers to be pure and genuine religion is this, to take care of orphans, the fatherless, which also translated fatherless, and widows in their suffering, and to keep oneself from being corrupted by the world. That word pure there, what God the Father considers to be pure, it means clean, free from corrupt desires, but I like this, it means like a vine cleansed by pure pruning, and so fitted to bear fruit. It means fitted to bear fruit. So I'm just going to switch the word here. What God the Father considers to be a fruitful And then the word genuine means this: free from that by which the nature of things is deformed, free from deformities, or this, free from that which the nature of things is deformed, or its force or vigor impaired. Or in the context of how we're been doing this series, or it's super impaired. Free from its super being impaired. So it says this, if you take this, what God the Father considers to be fruitful and super religion. A fruitful and super religion. And I bet you if I asked you today and said, what would you, if you made a list of God the Father, this is what he considered to be a fruitful and super religion, what would you think? You'd have your list of things, correct? This, prayer, worshiping, all of this, and that's all important. But look at the things he lists here as something that's fruitful and super in Christianity. Is to take care of the orphans or fatherless and widows in their suffering, and to keep oneself from being corrupted by the world. And notice this, James doesn't say God the provider, God the almighty, God our banner, God our healer. These are all names for God. God our sanctifier. He specifies God the Father, not just God a Father. It's God the Father. And when you add the in front of it, it makes it sound like it's the best. It's the only one. I've watched NFL football, and I've always been struck by how they'll get the players, they'll have this little thing that'll pop up while the game's going on, and it'll be like, Joe Smith, offensive lineman. Like they'll say their name and where they're from, and you'll be like, Joe Smith, offensive lineman, the Ohio State University. And then it'll be like, Mac Brown, wide receiver, the Miami U. And then you'll get someone else, Alabama University, and you're like, it's different than when someone says the Ohio State, the Miami, God the Father. He's the original Godfather, right? He's the Father. Not just another Father, he is the Father, God the Father. And when he says this, the Father's heart is fruitful and super Christianity, is to take care of orphans, take care of widows in their suffering, keep oneself from being corrupted by the world. In light of what we've been talking about releasing, reflecting, and flexing the super in us, I think this, he's saying to keep oneself from your kryptonite. Who's watched Superman? If you haven't, Superman had this thing that was called his kryptonite, that when he got around it, his super ceased to exist. And so he's kind of saying that keep yourself from being corrupted from the world. Keep yourself from your kryptonite. And so we're going to just do this quickly. This might not be, out of this world profound, but I'm going to give you 3 ways to flex your super today, and then we're done. The first 2 is general, and the third one's going to be directed toward fathers and father figures. 3 ways to flex your super. I'm going to first talk to those who may feel like they've ever been orphaned or you were orphaned. Your parents weren't a big part of your life, or maybe you have no parents. And so the 3 ways to flex your super, following off James, is number 1, let no one go through life feeling like they are an orphan. This is a way to flex your super. Let no one go through life feeling like they are an orphan. Now, obviously, orphan means, like I said, people who have lost their parents. And that's the literal definition, and that's usually where we go. But the word orphan here in James, it also means this: those bereft, that's an old word, of a teacher, guide, or guardian. Those who haven't had a teacher, a guide, or a guardian in their life. And maybe you should have had a father that was there for you, and instead it was more of a flaker, They just weren't around a lot. They weren't there to teach, guide, and guard. Maybe where you should have had someone to teach, guide, and protect you and guard you, you had those that criticized you, forgot you, and hurt you. See, I was blessed in that I had a father that was a good father and a good father figure for me. I'm blessed. A great example of a father. But I had a friend growing up that did not have that. And didn't have a father in the picture. I've taught many students that have not had a father figure in the picture. And I don't know about you, and hold on here if you don't have, if you're a single parent and you're raising kids without a father, I want to make sure you don't check out here, because this isn't as a criticism or an indictment of your situation. But I know there's times that if my wife was left to her own with the kids, they would start creeping up on her and start pushing on her, especially my son. And there's times where I look at him and I say, son, not today, son, And I go, you ain't going to be talking to your mom like that. You ain't going to be doing that in my house. This is still my house, And so there's times that fathers just can be able to step in and need to step in and just straighten out some situations. And so single moms, listen, don't listen to this, or listen to this. Don't listen to this as a criticism or a hopelessness of your situation, because we're talking about not just fathers today. We're intentional about talking about father figures. And so I believe for seasons, and by the grace of God, if you're a single parent, probably on both sides, but today we're talking about fathers, that you can act in the role of a father figure in your child's life. Graced by God to do it for that season. So it's not hopeless. It's not, oh, they're going to end up like this. No, there can be something that rise up that whether you're a mom and usually you'd be a little more timid, or usually you just let that pass, that something can rise up and you say, not today, son, not today, daughter. Some of that can rise up, and there's a grace to do that. But I don't want this to be an indictment on that. Actually, I want it to be a challenge on all men and father figures here, future father figures, that we need to start stepping up. And if there's some needs, if there's some single moms, if there's some things going on, we may need to step up and say, hey, how can I help be a father figure in this situation? That's more why I'm saying that, because there's some times where, and it's probably on both sides of this, where you just go, I don't know what to do. I need someone to step in. I need a man to step in and just help out this situation. I don't know what to do. There's things that obviously my wife is going to talk about with my daughters that if I was on my own, it would be a little bit tough to do, and I'm sure I'd be graced to do it, but there might be situations where people can step in and say, I can be a father figure. I can help this. And so, men to kind of rise up, not boys, not baby daddies. We need some men to rise up in lives and step up and allow the super father figure in them to come out. And I want to say this, just because someone has a present father, a father in the picture, does not mean that they do not feel orphaned. You could have a father in the picture, but if you're not getting taught, guided, or guarded by that father, you could have that orphan kind of feeling inside of you. So you may look and go, like, just because there's a two-parent home doesn't mean everything's going well, and that something's being fathered, and a father figure is teaching, guarding, and guiding this person. But on the flip side, just because someone doesn't have a present father does not mean that they will feel orphaned. Because I talked about there could be a grace for it. There could be other people. There could be a youth leader. There could be a mentor. There could be a pastor that comes in and help fill some of that. And so they don't have that idea of not feeling taught, guarded, or guided. And I just wanted to say this specifically if there's any teenagers in here, or young adults, or young people, or even adults. We have to give room for someone to teach, guide, and guard us. If you're feeling alone, if you're feeling abandoned, if you feel like no one cares, you have to create a space to allow a figure of some type come in and speak into that situation. If you shut down any kind of advice, James talks about it. If you just listen but never kind of go, hey, how can I do something with this? Then you're never going to be able to step out of that. You need some help. You need some father figures in your life to be able to walk you through that. So you have to be willing to able to be taught, guarded, and guided. All right. So what God the Father considers to be pure, what considers to be fruitful and super Christianity is this: to take care of the orphans or fatherless and widows in their suffering. Here's number 2 of how to flex the super. Let no one go through life feeling like they are a widow. Not small. That's a real dad joke. A widow person. Scott got that after I had to. A joke's never good when you have to explain it, so either told it wrong or, yeah. Let no one go through life feeling like they're a widow. This is what I kind of talk about, and I'll show you this idea of widow. Obviously, a widow or widower is when you've lost a spouse, and some people have done that in the natural. But I think the idea of widow is an emptiness that comes from experiencing a great loss. Because the word widow here comes from the root word chasma, C-H-A-S-M-A. And it means this. It means a gaping opening, a chasm, or a gulf. A gaping opening, a chasm, or a golf. And when you experience any kind of loss, whether it be a family member, whether it be a child, whether it be a job, whether it be your business from COVID, when you go through things, there feels like there's a chasm, there's a gaping opening, there's a gulf there that you can't get over. That's the idea of kind of feeling like a widow. Something in your life has lost and you don't know how to replace it. You don't know what to do with that gap. God the Father says what is the most fruitful and super thing he wants to do for us, and what we should be looking to do for others is to fill that and let no one go through life feeling like that at all times. And so yes, someone who has lost a spouse is literally become a widow or widower, but I believe it can go beyond this. Anyone who's experienced great loss in their life could have a gaping, wide open chasm that has potential to go through life like they're a widow. I've experienced some extreme loss. It was just 11 years. Did you just tell me that? 11 years since my best friend was accidentally shot and killed by his little brother. It's about as sudden as an extreme. I can't believe it's been 11 years since that season, but it feels like it's yesterday some days. And I remember yelling at God. I still can get emotional because that morning we had a grad the night before for a guy whose brother 2 weeks before got killed in a car accident. And so we had the grad, and I remember going, oh my goodness, I got to take some sound equipment we rented back. And I called my friend up early in the morning. Said, hey, I forgot about this. Can you help me? He said, no problem. He rolled out of bed with his bed hair, sweats, and came over. That's the kind of person he was for me. I could call anytime. He slept on our couch when he lived out of town, when he was doing work. Like it was just involved. And I remember saying, God, you literally cut my right arm off with this one. A massive chasm. I don't know if I fully answered the questions around that or if it's, been replaced. But in those moments, I felt widowed in that situation. And I'm not trying to throw light on ones that have physically gone through it, but that was a great experience of loss because of that. And so you can be married and still feel like there's a gaping, wide open chasm. You can have the best job and still wonder why you're not fulfilled. You can have a dream house and still feel like it's just empty. I put this, you can have a wedding and still feel like a widow. Just because you have a wedding, you can still feel like a widow. So we could have people sitting here that are struggling with some gaps, struggling with some gulfs, struggling with some chasms in their life. And I'm here to tell you today, God the Father is in the place. But also this, fathers, father figures, church, we are asked to step up, and the super inside of us, the fruitful religion, the fruitful the super Christianity that God says this is what I think is super, and a fruitful Christianity is this, to take care of orphans and widows in their suffering. That we help them when we say, hey, maybe there's a need, or hey, I've got a need. Maybe you're going through that. You reach out to someone and say, I need some father figuring, I need some mentoring, I need some help with this. Because you can have a wedding and still feel like a widow. That's why divorce is so high. They're living their marriage like they're widowed, like they're not even there, even though they had a wedding, even though they're in a relationship. That's why the divorce can be so high. That's why in an attempt to maybe fill this gap from past things, we get into relationships and get connected with people hoping they'll fill this chasm inside of us. The chasm of loss in our life, the hurt that's been done to us, the abuse we experienced as kids. And we're trying to fill it because it feels like that loss has sucked the super out of us. Anyone ever felt like life has sucked the super right out of you? Like gut punch? And only by looking to Jesus, remember, look to the perfect law of freedom, looking to Jesus and his love for us, can we start to begin the process of healing and reflecting on him, that we can start to get super in those areas again, or start releasing some super when we've been orphaned, when we've been widowed. I want to just do a word of caution, because I think we can say in church we look to Jesus, but often we look to people and things to fill this. If I could just get that car. If I could just have that boat, if I could just have that house, if I could just get that relationship, if I could just single people, if you so desire, and you're looking for a significant other in your life, if I could just have that, single moms, if I can just get a guy to come in and help me with this, right? Fill this gap, fill this void, fill this thing that is needed. But here's a word of caution to single ladies, specifically single moms. I want to say this. Don't sell your super short hoping to buy off your Superman. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that. But don't sell your super short hoping to buy off your Superman. God has put, come on, single ladies or ladies in general, moms, single moms, God has put some super inside of you. Your super spirituality, your pursuit of Jesus is super. Don't sell that short in hopes to buy off your Superman thinking it's going to happen. And he goes, oh, you don't need to be going to church. You don't need me to be doing that. You're selling your super short. Listen, ladies, you've got super sexuality. I'm going to say it. There's something God's designed in you, your beauty and your sexuality. Don't sell that short in hopes you're buying off your Superman. Come on. Don't give in. You have some standards. You have some ways. You're like, oh, I'm going to do this and don't do that. And he comes in. Don't sell that super part of you that God's put in you that's beautiful and meant for a certain context. Don't sell it short in hopes it's going to buy your Superman off. It never works out. I've seen it happen. It doesn't work out. Don't sell off your super intelligence. Don't sell off your super calling. Don't sell off your identity. Don't sell off what God's put in you in hopes it's going to buy your Superman. Superman's calling. Here's what I want to say. This whole device, I don't know what's going on here. These buttons and everything. Sorry, guys. I'm sorry. If you looked over, honey, why is it making this sound? Oh, that's terrible. I'm going to pay for that later. Oh, yeah, sorry. I was talking about Pat, not humor. It's just Pat, right? You got it all figured out. Take my teeth. No, sorry. No, that's bad. That's bad. I'm sorry. Oh, help me, Jesus. They only know I'm doing it out of love because, yeah. I don't know if I'll dig out of that one. But here's what I want to say as going on about don't selling your super short. Listen, if he don't embrace your super, he ain't your Superman. If he don't embrace your super, he ain't your Superman. He's your Wonder Boy. And you're going to wonder later on why you settled for a boy instead of a man. That wasn't in the notes. Don't settle for subpar when you've been made for super. That's everyone, in any situation, any relationship. I'm behind. I'm always behind. 27, continuing. What God the Father considers to be fruitful and super religion is this, super Christianity is this, to take care of the orphans and the fatherless, to teach, guide, and guard the fatherless, and to help fill the gap in widows in their suffering, and to keep oneself from being corrupted out of the world. Now I want to specifically talk to father figures here, future father figures, anybody who could be a father figure. Number 3, let no one go through life feeling corrupted by the world around them. See, we all have something that probably at one time or another has been our kryptonite, has been from the world and has corrupted us and felt like it's trying to suck the super right out of us. Future father figures, current fathers. It could be something that you've gone through in your past. It could be something that was said to you when you're little. It could be something happening in the culture right now or something you're currently going through. There are many things trying to kryptonite the super of father figures in society today. See, I think we live in a time right now where the role of father and father figures are becoming increasingly harder to find. Broken marriages and relationships, right? I think statistically, it is a way greater statistic that the children end up with the mother. Not that that's wrong, but that tends towards this. Absentee fathers. Missing identity, gender ambiguity, increased feminism push. The pushback on the idea of strength, the pushback on the idea of super of a father figure has definitely been challenged. And so maybe you know what your kryptonite has been as a father. Maybe it's not even something that happened that it started with you. Maybe it started with your father. Maybe it started with your grandfather. Maybe it started with your great-grandfather and has been passed down from generation to generation to generation. And it's been a struggle. And it has always been the thing that feels like it's holding back your super. Maybe there's some generational things that have been passed down the line from generation to generation, whether it's non-present fathers in the home, whether it's something to do with addictions, maybe it's anger, and has been always a part that you've just seen and you've been raised this and you find yourself struggling with it and it seems to be your kryptonite. Maybe it's an addiction that just, everyone seems to have and it's been something in your family for so long and it seems to be the kryptonite that sucks the super out of you. Maybe it's abuse. You just find yourself saying things that you shouldn't be saying, or maybe physically doing things you shouldn't be doing. Fathers. And your nurture, ready? Nurture being the environment and circumstances in which you were raised and grew up. That's what nurture is. Your nurture has crept in and started to take over your nature. And by nature, I'll get into this a bit more. By nature, I mean the way God has designed you to be. The DNA inside of you, the greatness inside of you, the purpose inside of you, the calling inside of you, that God designed you to be, the super inside of you, your nurture starts to come in and take over from that design that God had for you because of things that have been passed down. And sometimes we may even start to feel like our lives are cursed. Anyone ever thought that? My life's just cursed. Nothing goes right. Just seems like everything has just been not that great. And you may have even heard in church about generational curses. See, but I believe as Christians, Jesus has redeemed us from the curse. And it says, cursed is anyone who hangs on a tree. And he hung on a tree on the cross. And he became the curse so that we don't have to be cursed. He became the curse so we could be blessed. So if you feel like, man, it's just been cursed, it's been like that, and we'll talk about that, the idea that, guess what? Your nature inside of you pulls towards that curse, pulls towards that because of sin. But it says if you become new in Christ, if you make Jesus a part of your life, he takes that old nature out and he puts a new one inside of you. But I need to say this, and I was talking with Pastor Jim about this in a meeting as we were navigating some of these things. While I don't think we have a generational curse, when you step into Jesus, you can step past the curse and like the things of that. We do have generational consequences that we have to deal with. See, listen, when Jesus comes and puts a new nature inside of you, it doesn't say he put a new nurture inside of you. You still have a new heart. You have the ability to overcome. You have the ability to walk into some things, but you still got your thoughts that you had before. You still got that things like the way you were raised that you have to now deal with. The consequences of some of those generational things are very real. And in the context of today, I want to call them flaws. You're not flawed, but the flaws, the character flaws, the character deficiencies, the things that are passed down or that you have in your life, let me tell you, kids reflect just your parents. And your flaws that you struggle with, they take it and amplify it. And so a generational flaw comes from a generational cause. A generational flaw has a generational cause. A flawed father, talking to father or father figures, comes from a flawed nurture. A generationally flawed father comes from a generationally caused nurture. And so we see flaws amongst fathers today, which has led to some of the stuff we've seen, which has led to their super being kryptonited. And we talked about this in a vision team a few days ago, and I felt like it needed to be addressed a little bit in that they're the cause of something that's been in the news of late. It's been prevalent, and I've had a few people ask kind of like, when are you going to say something about this? And I didn't just want the church to post something just because. But if you follow the news, you've heard of the tragedy in Kamloops. I don't know why I'm getting emotional. In which 215 children, now more, they're finding out, were discovered in unmarked graves, and many of whom were not even known to be there, most likely. I can't imagine not knowing what happened to a child. Just not knowing. And this coming to light has added much needed awareness to the tragedies that took place over decades in the residential schools. I had heard the word genocide associated with this, and I'm going to be honest, at first I pushed back. I did. Ask my wife, we had a heated discussion for about 30 minutes that woke our kids up around this. As I was contending with this, praying about it, meditating about it, I thought, it's not this, they're just this, and searching for the right thing to try to understand. I thought it's too intense of a word, it's too overstated, but I looked up the word, and also I called a few people and talked to them and said, what are your thoughts on this? Some First Nation Indigenous friends, and said, what do you think about this? How should I be seeing this? But the word genocide means this: the deliberate and systematic destruction of a group of people because of their ethnicity, nationality, religion, or race. And I realized that this is ultimately what was happening, some purposefully and some maybe unintentionally. But residential schools, and as I was talking to someone, reserves, taking away land, were a deliberate attempt to eliminate. And the reason why is because there's actually quotes from government where they said to eliminate all things Indian, or to get the Indian right out of them. That's documented from officials saying that was their goal, to push them to the margins, push them to the corners, not have to think about them, and get it right out of them. So because of this cause, remember, flaws have cause, most done with the support of certain denominations of the church and in the name of religion, there have been consequences or flaws that have been handed down for the last few generations. Several generations. You cannot pull kids away from their family's culture and heritage without having the effects of this continue on. You cannot have your kids just disappear without knowing what happened to them and not have it affect you. So the effects of this have contributed to what is now a struggle for Indigenous people to regain identity in their homes, their families, and fighting the generational flaws from becoming orphans and widows. So I'm here to first stand up and say we acknowledge there was a cause for the flaws. That we've seen. And I want to say these are thoughts I've had, and God's dealt with my heart, and in talking that I've said this: the solution isn't just to say get over it happened a long time ago. I have thought that in frustration. It's not to say it wasn't my fault, I wasn't the one who did it to them, which I have also thought. Honestly, it's not even to throw money at that, although I've heard that's, if you just give money, it's not that. I don't say I have all the answers, but I wanted to stand up today and say that I am here to listen and understand. And it is to stand with anyone that feels like this has happened to them, to let you know you are not alone. We will do as Paul says, and we will mourn with those who mourn. We will rejoice with those who rejoice. And we will do as Jesus said and love God with all our heart, soul, and strength, and we will love our neighbors as ourselves. As I was processing this, I said there is no scenario where I see Jesus standing up and going, that's great that happened. Whatever you fall and however you talk this through, I don't see Jesus going, well, that's the way we love the best. And so we love our neighbor as we ourselves have been loved. And show the greater love of Jesus' follower, where we will lay down our thoughts, our ideas, our lives for our friends. We will stand, and I will stand with you when you feel abandoned. We will be with you when you feel orphaned. We will support you when you feel widowed. We will help you when your kryptonite has sucked your super. But listen, as a pastor and a Jesus follower, I can't end with the cause. We must push on towards a possible cure, a moving forward. And so as a Jesus follower, I just want you to know that you're loved. And let fathers know, particularly fathers here or fathers listening, that God, the Father, knows the cause, sees the flaws, and loves you in that, but cares enough to offer a cure. And Pastor mentioned it this morning already, Romans 8:15-17. For you did not receive the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you received the spirit of adoption by which we cry out, Abba, Father. See, orphan, widows, lost, feeling alone, there's Jesus, or Paul says in Romans that God has adopted us, if you so choose, into a family. He signed the adoption papers. The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God and joint heirs with Christ. And if indeed we suffer with him, that we may also be glorified together. We are heirs with Christ. If you step into Jesus and become a Jesus follower, we're all one family. And you can have your adoption paper signed. And you don't have to feel like you're alone. You don't have to feel like that there's nobody for you, that you're widowed, that you're by yourself. God, your Father, loves you and has signed the adoption papers. You can be a part of the biggest family on earth and heirs to his blessing and glory. Without Jesus, your and my natures are flawed. We call this the sin nature. It was handed down all the way back from Adam and Eve. With Jesus, we are new creations. Old things have passed away. All things become new. The new nature has come. But we still have to deal with our old nurture. We still have to navigate the generational flaws of nurturing. And I want to talk to some father figures. You may be here today doubting your super because of some of the things you've had to deal with, or your fathers had to deal with, or your fathers' fathers have to deal with. But I want to say this: the flaws of our fathers do not have to be the cause for our futures. The flaws of the fathers don't have to be the cause for futures. Or another way to say that, your future does not have to be determined by the flaws of the past. This is really what I saw. Like it takes someone, a generation, to stand up and say, it's a turnaround generation. I've heard Brad's testimony. I think your grandfather was an alcoholic. Is that right, or just your father? Both. Several generations. Alcoholism. Flaws of the fathers passed down, and he encountered Jesus, and everything changed. And he is a turnaround generation, where he said, this is no longer going to be the cause for my future and my kids' future and my kids' future, but today I'm going to put a pause on the effects of the generational cause or flaws. I'm going to put a pause and I'm going to switch something. And from now on, my kids are going to get something different what I got. And their kids are going to get something different from what they got. And it starts to be a turnaround generation. Listen, I'm here to tell today some current fathers, some future fathers, some father figures, that any future father figure, that you do not have to live from your flaws. You can live from your flex. Come on, look at your neighbor and flex. Come on, show them your flex. I know this was a little heavy and we're going to close this off. But the point of that is saying you don't have to live from flaws. You can live from your flex. Every one of you has some super in you, and you can live from your flex. Some of you are probably already doing this, like Brad has done some of this. But it's time to live from the talents, the abilities, and the super God has put in you, father figures, to show off, to purposely brag about what God's done inside of you. Future father figures, current father figures, it's time to rise up. There's more super in you than you know. It's time to stop flawing and start flexing. Flex your faith. Flex your fatherhood. Flex your calling. Flex your leadership. Flex your love. Flex your kindness. Flex your strength. Flex your forgiveness. Music team, you can come up. The question we started off with, what father figure would I be, or I'm changing it now, what father figure would I be if I let the super flex out of me? What father figure would I be if I let the super flex out of me? I said earlier that this is kind of known as a fatherless generation, or maybe I didn't say it that exact way, but I believe there's going to be some turnaround. And instead of this generation and this time being known as a fatherless generation, I think it's time that we're known as the father flex generation. Will we stand up and say, we're going to flex what God's put inside of us? I felt that the way to kind of end this today, as I was praying about it, is to pray for fathers. We're going to pray for fathers, father figures, future father figures, then we're going to give away some barbecues. We're going to give away some stuff. But I asked Harrison Thunderchild to come up, and I just wanted him to pray for fathers, for healing, and towards the super being coming out. So come on up, Harrison, and just kind of do it. I said, hey, maybe in English, in Cree, because he knows Cree, and just kind of do a prayer that can kind of heal some hearts and move some things forward. So let's give him a hand as he comes on up. He did say, he was like, I got to share some things. So hopefully he's a preacher. So we'll see.
I had both of my shots, so I can take this off for a minute. Nanaskaman, I'm very honored to be here, to be asked by the Unigani, the pastors, to come say a prayer and that. Egwa, Dr. Gisagao Magakyo Mama Taye Magananaskama, every day is a Father's Day. It's supposed to be a Father's Day. Thanking Him that gave us eternal life. That's how I was raised. When the pastor asked me to speak, my blood pressure went up to 115, my heart rate. And it's not so much, there's no fear when you're a retired school teacher. It's just, God, use me. Let me say the right things. My name is Ispimekap Mota, he who speaks from above. It was a Cree name given to me at birth. I was named after an Anglican priest, Harrison, from Elkhorn Residential School. Dad went there. To honor him, they named me Harrison. Not to be outdone, the other church that was on a reservation, the Roman Catholics, Father Gaston. So I get his name. So I carry a French name and an English name. And then not to be outdone, my dad said, wait a minute. Chief Thunderchild already told me this is my last son, and he shall be the last. There was more truth to that than anything. I got delivered from residential schools. They went and hid me in a bush with one of our elders. But as it turned out, I was the youngest of the whole family. As I stand here at 2012, all of my brothers and sisters, mom and dad died in a 5-year period, and I'm the baby, and I'm alive. The University Hospital, ICU unit, cardiac unit, and also my doctors, they call me the miracle man. This church had a lot to do with that. Those listening, watching, City Center Church Mamstai, with the Etoskahachik, Egoichahachik, Daisy Nimnawa. Op Megaki Dochte, Magota, a bedside housewatchik. Ota, Daisy Nimnog, and Miss Jessica, goes Otagayachik. City Center is put here by God. They could be someplace else on the outskirts of the city to avoid our people. I just told my people, but they're put here by God to help us, to assist us, to pray for us. And that's what I just sent out. And I thank this church because a year ago, and today also, I shared the service. One nephew from Seattle, Washington listened 3 Sundays in a row. Another one from Prince Albert. Both of those nephews are now in heaven. They died from COVID. One was that high-profile teacher. That's my nephew. But we had a chance to talk about Jesus because I undertook what Pastor Derek shared. Those superflexing, the father figure characteristics on that. All of us in the Cree tradition were raised that way. The expectations were there. When our brother dies, his children became ours. Our sister dies, their children become ours. I always tell I saw my grandson. He's 6'7" now. But when he was 2 foot something, he was crying. Oh, pitiful little face, I wanted to pick him up. Well, that's how Jesus is. When we cry, when we look up, he looks at us, tears fall from his eyes, and he scoops us up and helps us. Dapono, he told the truth or not. And those children, 215 and counting. My dad was one of them, but he never succumbed to the bad side, but he survived. I went to one of the grave sites in Elkhorn, Manitoba. But he told the same story. Little babies, 4 years old, crying. Now, can you imagine? Little girl, how many have seen children cry, whimper to themselves? 4-year-old saying, Mama, Tata, middle of the night. My dad said when they went to go and comfort these little boys, little girls, they were hit. It's at 3 o'clock in the morning, they put on boxing gloves on us. Just to put on the show. There was worse stories, but there was also good people in the midst of that's happening. It's not God's fault these children ended up like that. God did not put those men in there. The intent was to provide a safe home like every father, every dad. We wouldn't harm our children. I have 3 children, and they're healthy, and they all know the Lord, and they're watching me right now. God trusted me. And that's what Anocha got big with. This is what he was talking about Anocha. Kispen peahtek nam to nehtama. Kak tapahtama koski kwa tehin naosa. Kwa sama gespain. Ekwa ksewatsu and that's love. That is something that thrives in this church, is the love and the patience. And there is nothing superficial about it. Every time I come in here, I feel the love of God. Manto otaetakot. And I just wrapped up his service inside 10 minutes, I think, 5-10 minutes. But I like his style because it's longer, and he teaches more. This is not the first time. I want everybody to know. Jim and I go back to that school in the back over here. I started late in my studies to be a teacher when I was student teaching, micro teaching. Guess who was the principal there when I was teaching? This guy. Good boss. Maga kani paunano. If you'll stand with me, I will pray and decree in that of everything that's happening, and that is going to happen and will happen in the future, and that. All things that happen are not of our doing, and that it's just the way things are, we have to accept them the way they are, and that is how I've survived. I cannot do anything to change the things that happen to me. I just accept them. I just go, so be it. Get the basic in. You're the boss to my God. Another brother I want to acknowledge. Right here, Brad Mayer. All of you guys have super gifts. My sister-in-law had an extended life of 6 months. He came and prayed for her at the city hospital. She was one of those older church institutions. Okay, she was Catholic. And she didn't, the key was accepting Jesus. He passed that message. And there was a prophet in the book where he laid over a body and those bones came alive. Right here. I'm serious. She came back and told us of a heaven that was blue and white. She witnessed to her husband, my brother, all her children. She was brought back to preach. And on that day, she died. We didn't cry. Yes, I'll see you later. This is City Center Church. I love you. Maka, let's pray. Mama taima. Kitamom se back magman nakatata kiskaw big squat. Ego minan tas pahake mon kuihon Jesus. Ego minna kekoses. Kiota kakin posta mauja. Kia kakin ni posta mauja automat patta skon nanoche. Ego kispan katabo game ta koden ta ni nanoche sisa man tumnan kesek tapn ta. Tattep matsuin. Tattep matsuin me krusnan. Ego rota gaya tuko tochige ego toskahaganak. Ego aniganista kok saweim. Kaikki oksis ego minoga. Nits ne hievak ego minat. Nahtohan no siskape tohteet sekota. Passi moga tehti ja si paano akpokite ohtse. Saweim minegonak. Ego tega ketapahtaa koga. Saweimina mistet me koats aksuak. Kaikki on kuama aksuin. Kovi kate namoga te peisiket. Eksisen mataan. Ego kote. Kamskahtika vassak. Tanssetako kiitngeetsik maka saweim. Saweim. Muona manto kaituutta. Angankin napeo kaikki tako tehissä. Että pitos. Emma chatsik. Maka siinä maak. Mojetska kiitta pajak. Kaikki teemaa ketohtetuute machano. Tämä näktöä muisten pai maata. Mä koote kissako kaikki joka uita kohteok. Eikä mä mohtaimaa kaikki savei moke. Kaktussikin et se koota. Eikä on Simso Derek. Eikä minun Simso Tadjem eikä Brad koska savei maa. Koska tehu auhtun taka sohkaa pauak. Eikä nän askamon Nossa makuuta. Eikö ne meik sauemmin. Eikö ne kossak. Eikö ne tanssa oote. Kaikki jau. Eikö minä ne kossak. Tako naote toskina. Kaikki jau. Poki teo. Tää pahtahkoot se. Sauemmaa mohtaa emaa. Ekse tamataan. Kui hone. Father God, this I pray. In your name, Jesus, Father God. And everybody said, Amen.